Hey guys, so I'm recording this video to show you the current bacteria status and its behaviors, the looks, what's done, what's still in progress, and what can be changed. That's kind of the plan of this video. So you can see here on the left my control panel where I can tweak a lot of things, and on the right we have one tiny version of the biopool. You can see the biopool has some particles floating around. What you're going to see basically me changing is, especially when we go over the behaviors, is this section here allows me to program bacteria before I add them to the pool. Some sort of simulator of what the hub would be. So let's start with adding a bacteria. I'm going to start by adding a neutral bacteria with nothing, which in this case, it's going to be the blob hub, and you can see for DNA number 0, so that will be for the first chain or device, there's nothing connected, nothing connected, nothing connected, nothing connected. So that will be the most neutral bacteria that has nothing in it with the blob hub design. So that would give you this shape. You see the color is gray, and basically it does nothing, it just sits there. So maybe let's go over the whole current status of the shapes. So you saw the blob, then we have the bean, then we have the cross, and we have the diamond. Again, those are still totally changeable. We kind of like them now. We think this is pretty close to final, but we can always tweak them, and that's not difficult to do. So we have 4 bacteria. They're all neutral, which means they do nothing. Let's start going through some of the what's. Maybe that's the easiest way to start. So to do that, I'm going to start by setting one DNA chain as enable, and I'm going to set the sensors to always, so whatever we choose to do, it's always going to be doing it. So let's start with make red. That's one of the simplest ones. So always do a little of red. I'm going to add a bacteria with that instruction set. And you will see this bacteria starts off and starts applying its logic, and it's making a little bit of red. A little bit of red means just glows, right? But it doesn't produce any red. I have this debug mode where I can hover over the bacteria and I can see a few things. For example, for this case, you can see the logic of what's the bacteria doing. Always do a little bit of red so I can read it. And those are like the tests that the bacteria is doing on the environment. You can see the T and then 0, all the zeros and the last one. And the R is the result of that test. It's not something you need to know, but just so you can follow the video better. So that's what happens when a bacteria is programmed to make red. Obviously, make green and blue is going to be similar, but I'm going to add one anyway. So let's make green. That's going to be blue. Then we have the case that the bacteria could have green and blue at the same time. So I'm going to make another strand that is very similar to the first one, and I'm just going to do always do a little of blue, and on another strand always do a little of green. So I'm going to add this new bacteria here, and you will see it starts glowing in both colors. We have the gradients as we talked about. We made them looser as so less contrasty. The transition between green and blue is less obvious, so it's more like a mixed color. Then you can also see what happens when they're red, green, and blue at the same time. So let's say always make a little red, so then we have 3 colors at once. This, and there you have it. So that's making a little bit of one of the colors. Next step is maybe follow. So I'm going to make a bacteria that always follows a little. Again, we're just going through the actions, so I'm not going to focus on the sensors yet to make it step by step. So I'm going to add this bacteria that will follow everything that's around it. So I'm going to add it, and you can see always do a little follow, and then my debug mode shows the vectors of who is being attracted to. So he's going to aim in that direction and start pushing that direction. None of these behaviors have been balanced, meaning the intensity and the force and all these things of how fast they move needs to be tweaked entirely, especially on the given the large scale of installation. So everything there is like something I can tweak through here. Like in this case, bacteria follow gain is going to decide how fast, how strong they push when they try to follow someone. So I could regulate that. The other thing that you're not seeing is in this particular behavior, when you follow or you flee, you would have some tail, some flagella. Those are not programmed yet, but they're obviously on the list. As you can see, all of these bacteria have nothing on their membranes. That's because they have no sensors, because there's no such thing as an always sensor. That's why they look so plain right now. Something you're also seeing that might not be obvious is the cytoplasm is also there. Right now it's just black, pure black with a little bit of alpha. So if you see a bacteria going behind, you can a particle going behind, you can see it just fades out a little bit, but it's still there. So we've seen follow. Let's make follow a bit more obvious. So if I get this out, 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 it's still going to try to follow these guys as long as they're in range. These guys are almost out of range, so if they get out of range, they won't be able to follow. But now these bacteria, which is always following whatever's around it, will try to go towards where everyone is. Let's do flee in the meantime. As you can see, the follow is not really strong. That's mostly because it's a little. If I went to large, it would follow stronger. But again, we have the gain, so we can always change those things. So we've seen this. Now I'm going to make one that flees. So always do a little of a flee in case. Maybe let's make a lot of flee so it's obvious. So I'm going to put it here. And immediately we'll start applying its rules, saying, oh, there's other bacteria around here. I don't want to be around any of those. So I'm going to flee. And it's just going. Something else that you're seeing is the organelles. With these examples that I'm adding right now, the organelles all look the same, but that's because the rules behind the organelles make them look the same. So in this case, these bacteria only has one strand or device, or like a sentence, let's put it that way. That's why you only have one organelle. If you have two of them, you should have two. In this debug mode, what I'm doing here is when I enable more of those things, this simulates having more pieces connected to one single port of the hub. So you will never see more than one organelle in this simulation. What you do see is the number of dots inside the organelle. So this organelle, if you can see, only has one dot. Well, this one has two dots. It's subtle. We can tweak those things, but we think it's enough. The number of dots represents the number of sentences inside of that port. So this guy is only doing one sentence of programming. Always do a little bit green. If you go to here one, you see you have two. It's always do a little bit green and blue. So that's why you have two dots. That explains the organelles a little bit. In the meantime, we see that this guy that is fleeing is managed to get himself away enough from everyone else, so he's kind of on his own. While the following guy, which I think is this guy, is together with these two guys, and it will always try to do that. Even if I push them out, it will manage to get back, as long as they're in range. So these guys are now out of range, so he will just go to whoever is closer, in this case between these two guys. Okay, so we've seen flee. Again, remember we're missing the flagella. Those are going to come soon. Let's see stick. So one bacteria that always sticks is the bacteria that is the first one that will show a different membrane. Right now, the transition between sticking and non-sticking is not done. So the membrane will start plain and then it will jump into stick mode. Let's just add it here. So always do lots of stick. The bacteria starts plain, and then when the sensor gets activated, you see the sticky membrane. Look for the bacteria. So the membrane is way more rough. It's got a little bit of animation. That's something that, again, is doable through assets, and I can show you, let's see, where are those? What we have right now. They're not final, but this should be a good representation of what we want here, skin types. So these things you see overlaid, that will be this one segment of a membrane, with a hole, which is used when when one of the bacteria has to spew color. This is not programmed yet, but you will see later. So here you see the assets used for a little bit of sticky membrane, and that's the assets used for a lot of sticky membrane. You can see the little squares because that's an animation. So this is frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, and they cycle all over. And same for all of those, because the membrane, when it's solid, doesn't have an animation, and there's only one frame, and same with the hole. Those are the other sensor animations, which are not final, but we'll go through those later. Just wanted to show you how this works internally. So get this out. So we've seen how it looks when it's sticky, but we haven't really seen how it behaves. So I'm going to add one new bacteria that's neutral, just to see how it happens when they actually come in contact. So I'm going to make them close, and now it's sticked. If you notice, these other bacteria here, when they touch, but they don't actually have any forces that keep them together because they're not sticking. So they will just slide on each other, but not stay together. Well, this guy now is properly glued, so if I try to get it out, I can, but you have to apply a lot of force. So you see, they kind of pull together. So that's a lot of stick, and that's a little stick. You see the membrane changes a little bit. It's not as rough. It still animates, but quite slowly. Again, sticky bacteria will always stick to anything, but they will stick extra strong to other sticky bacteria. So here, let me make them together. So if there's any motion that tries to get them separate, it's going to have a hard time doing that. Especially the more surface there is in contact, the more difficult it is to separate them. It's still possible, but they do stick. Okay, so we've seen all the behaviors that I have implemented. Each color is still missing. I have to do that. And pop apparently might not be required, but I might do it too, just in case. Which basically we gave the tour of all the whats. We haven't done all the whens, so I'm going to start with that. So let's make one. Let's start with a simple one. Let's say when red, make red. So in the pool there's not really any red apart from this guy who is red. So I'm going to make something far from him to begin with. So we have a new bacteria that's looking for red, and when it finds red, it will make red. You can now see the sensors around the bacteria skin. They're inactive, so they're sleeping. That's why you only see these little dots, which are the little eyes we talked about. Again, those are assets we can change, but we don't feel it's going to be very different from this. So you saw the bacteria has now got close enough, the sensors got activated, and you're seeing a lot of things happening. First, the reaction, the membrane got red. The sensors are activated, so they're animating in and out. And then you see the organelles and the wiring connecting the organelles. So each organelle is connected to whatever sensors it's getting information from. And when these sensors are activated, the animation shows that the information is being sent, that stimulus is being sent. So let's make one that is looking for more than one thing. So let's say when red, do a little red, and when green, do a little green. Adding this new bacteria here. You see the sensors alternate on the membrane, so we have green eyes and red eyes looking for red and green. If I get close to either of those, they will activate. So I'm going to push this guy away so we start just with red, so you can see how one sensor activates but the other one doesn't. You will see the wiring or the organelle still doesn't quite work. Right now the red ones are connected and the green ones are not connecting. That's how it's supposed to be, but you will see that if I add a green item around here, it will still not show up. That's a bug that I'm aware of. So now actually it works now. Yeah, it's still something I need to look into. But basically now these bacteria is seeing green and red, so it's reacting to it by making green and red. So you see the membrane is green and red, and the sensors are excited because they're seeing green and red. So that's the when sensors. Blue is going to be the same, so I'm going to skip it. What else do we have? We have when strangers. So let's say when strangers flee, which is something that seems like quite common sense. So I'm going to make a bacteria when it sees a stranger, it will flee. Because I'm going to make a diamond hub bacteria. I'm going to start by adding to non-strangers to see how the sensors don't activate. So those are the sensors. Excuse me. For strangers, they're not the final design. You can see they're like animating a little bit, but very subtly, so it's not too obvious. So that we have the contrast of when they're actually triggered. So as I said, now there's a bacteria nearby, but it's not a stranger, so I'm not going to be activating the sensors. If I happen to add another bacteria that is, let's say, flower is out across, add neutral clause just to make sure the sensors get activated. You will see the sensors slowly activate. The organelle shakes a little bit, indicating like, okay, this is starting, and the bacteria starts doing its behavior, which in this case is fleeing, and it's fleeing away from the bacteria that's causing the sensors to trigger. And now it got far away enough, and it stopped fleeing. We can add some more, and we can even surround it, see what happens. It will try its best to make its way out of it. In this case, it's averaging the sources of all of those locations and tries to get out. I think fleeing doesn't have enough strength because it's not strong enough to push these out of the way. Let's try to change that. Some more gain here. I think the friction is the reason. So there's some friction in the pool. Here, let's do that. And there's also some limits. There's a lot of settings. Okay, that helps a lot. So now it managed to make some space to push itself out of the way of anything that's a stranger. As soon as it gets away from this, there will be no stranger, so it will just stop. Let's get the friction back, otherwise it gets very drifted. There. Okay, so we've seen when strangers, then we're going to see when family. So these new bacteria that we'll add, it will still be a diamond, and it will have when family sensors, and when it sees a family member, it will follow it. So in this case, I'm going to add it around here. You see the sensors are idling, looking for things, but not being activated because there's nothing that looks like family. But if I add another one, just like myself, there will be family around me. The organelles get crazy, the sensors get all the wiring on them, so now they're trying to follow each other. Because it's only two of them, they're not actually following, they're just like trying to be inside of each other, which is pushing each other. So let's separate them. Oh, that was too much. But it found some other families, so it went over there. Alright, so we've seen the when, and then we've seen all the sensors, basically. What we haven't seen is the spewing. So let's go back to that. I'm going to do something simple, like when reds do a lot of blue. because we have lots of make blue that will make my body not just glow but also spew. Right now the spewing happens from the center of the bacteria. The plan is to make that happen from the hole on the membrane of the bacteria, but that's still to be tested. I'm not sure how that's going to be clear or not. So let's go ahead and add it. Have a bacteria, because this bacteria has the capability of making blue and spewing. You see the membrane has a hole. That would be the spewing point. Currently that's not 100% sure. We need to see how it feels or looks. Again, it's a bacteria that's looking for red, so it has red sensors around it. There's no red around here, but I can add some red myself. So I'm gonna spew some red with the mouse, and that should trigger the sensors. You can see they're excited, and the bacteria should start spewing blue, which is one of the rules that it has. Right now there's no currents on the pool. I can enable the vector field here. You can see these red dots. I can add some current to make things a bit more dynamic, although that's something we need to work out still as well, because when there's currents, things just get pushed to the edge and it's not very interesting. I'm going to try to make a circular current like that. I'm going to hide the field. Oh, the red went away, so we lost all the sensors are not activated anymore. So let's make some more red. A lot of it. That should activate the bacteria, and it should start making blue. You can see all the bacteria following the force field to the current field. That's the blue. I think the threshold is not quite right, because there's still quite a lot of red around it, but it's not seeing anymore, so we should be more less restrictive about this. Let's just add it close, make a new one, but close to a red bacteria so that we have blue all the time. Seems like the spewing is a bit short, so maybe I can add some more spewing. No, that would be here. And we can also increase the gain of the spew itself. There, that's a bit more visible. All those things, especially with the projector double-sided screen, we will need to be tweaking on site because the light might not be so clear. Same with the blacks and the particles in the back. Even the grays on the membranes might not be so clear, so we need to test all those on site. But that's what the spewing is going to look like. So now this spew is going all over the pool. If there were more current, it will flow better. Again, that's something we can tweak, how much the spew goes in and out. We need to find it. Fields. Oh, it's up here. Yeah. So that's not it. That's it. We've seen spewing. Let's see what happens when we spew in several colors at the same time. So I'm going to say, let's make it always so it's easier to test. Always do lots of green, always do lots of blue. So let's make these bacteria. That's always spewing. Again, as I said, all of those things are tweakable. So we can decide how the spew looks like. If we only get the actual particles that are kind of gentle, we can increase how they look. Or also the blur overlays, and we can decide how much there is, how it expands. So that will be green and blue, which are not very different. We might need to tweak these colors so they're more obviously, but I think it's a good mix. Let's say red and blue. Adding bacteria with red and blue. Always do lots of red, always do lots of blue. There you have it. Something else that's completely missing is the motion of the bacteria is looks pretty static right now. There's no animations. Basically, they're just sitting there and not making any sort of animations. The skin is pretty rigid because that's something we wanted, so that you can understand, even when they're in contact, you can still tell what half shape they are. But the skin should shake a little bit or feel more fluid when it's not in contact with anything else. That's something we'll do as well. Same with the motion. Right now everything is very fluidy, very soupy. We want to add some Brownian motion on that. So at least they're shaking more or seeing more reactive. Although that might not help to understand what's going on, but we'll need to find a balance there. So don't judge too much the motion of the bacteria themselves. It's more about like point interactions where, yeah, this is a bacteria and exists here, and this bacteria exists here, and I'm going to interact with you by doing these actions. But the looks of the bacteria, like the motion of the membrane itself, is not even started yet. So don't focus on that. I think we've seen all the behaviors. What else is missing? Oh, we haven't seen oscillate. So let's see oscillate. Let's say always oscillate blue. So let's make one that oscillates blue. So there you have it. It's the rate of oscillation is something we can tweak as well. It has to be something that's obvious. Right now, the transition between the colors of the membrane might be too slow, so we can maybe speed it up so it's more obvious that it's oscillating, something like that. But it's all trade-offs. Like, we need to tweak those things to see what feels right. The system is already so complex with so many parts at play that it's hard to get everything right. So I think that's pretty much everything. We have stop, which is quite a complicated rule, so I haven't started with that yet, especially because it's not clear what has to stop. But I'll get into that soon as well. Those are the basics that are in right now. I think that's pretty much it. I can show you maybe some of the field with more intensity. Or what happens when they're all one edge. So the fluid goes pretty fast. You will see it loops back on this side once, actually it won't because the screen is bigger, but the fluid will loop back. So if I shoot some down here, it will come back at the bottom. We're not sure if the bacteria should do the same, maybe at least on these edges. It's something I need to test, see how it feels. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Alright guys, I'm sure you'll have questions, so go ahead.